Picture this. It's April 16th, 1746. We're on a wet, windswept moor in the Scottish Highlands. Two armies are about to clash in a battle that not only decide the fate of a royal dynasty, but will completely change the course of British history. This is the story of the Battle of Culloden. So how did a battle that was over in less than an hour manage to change a nation forever? I mean, think about that. Just 60 minutes. But the fallout? It would echo for centuries, and it ended up dismantling an entire way of life. So let's dive in and see how this all went down. All right, so to really get this, we've got to go back to the beginning. And this story kicks off not with an end, but with a really bold, really ambitious plan. A prince's attempt to reclaim a throne, which lit the fuse on a rebellion known as the 45 Rising. At the heart of all this were the Jacobites. Their goal was pretty simple, but huge: put the Catholic House of Stuart back on the British throne. The name Jacobite actually comes from Jacobus, which is just Latin for James, and the face of the movement in 1745? A charismatic young guy named Charles Edward Stuart. You probably know him better as Bonnie Prince Charlie. And you know what? For a hot minute, it looked like they were actually going to pull it off. Charles lands in Scotland in July 45, rallies the Highland clans, and boom, scores a stunning victory at Prestonpans. His army just swells. By December, can you believe it? They're all the way down in Derby. That's just 125 miles from London. The city was in a total panic. But this was it. This was their peak. Without the English support they were hoping for, the leaders made the tough call to turn back. And that's when the long, hard retreat north began. So that long retreat drags on and on, all the way into the spring of 46. You can imagine, right? Supplies are running low, everyone's exhausted, and the government army, led by the Duke of Cumberland, is breathing down their necks. They were cornered, and they were forced to make a really desperate gamble. The night before the big battle, they try this last-ditch, super risky move: a surprise night attack on Cumberland's camp. But oh man, it was a disaster. It was pitch black, the march was chaotic, super slow, and by dawn they were still miles away. They had to call it off. And the worst part? The men had to slog all the way back to their own lines at Culloden. They were already tired, and now they were just completely wiped out. And this right here tells you everything you need to know. Just look at the difference between the two armies. On one side, you have the Jacobites. They're outnumbered, totally exhausted from that failed march, and literally starving. On the other side, the government army. Bigger, well-fed, well-rested. They'd even just celebrated their commander's birthday with extra food. I mean, it's just no contest. The stage was set for something that was going to be less of a fair fight and more of a tragedy. Okay, so here we are, the morning of April 16th. The two armies are facing each other on this flat, boggy piece of land called Dromacy Moor. And what happens next? Well, battle isn't even the right word for it. It was a brutal, shockingly fast slaughter. It all kicked off with cannons, and the government's artillery was just leagues better, and the men knew exactly what they were doing. For about 9 minutes, just 9 minutes, they just hammered the Jacobite lines. Cannonballs were tearing through the ranks, and the Jacobite cannons, they were basically useless. The clansmen were getting mowed down before they even had a chance to make a move. Finally, the order comes: charge. But their signature move, the terrifying Highland charge, was doomed from the get-go. First off, the ground was all boggy and wet, which totally slowed them down. And as they're running, the government cannons switched to canister shot. Think of it like a massive shotgun blast. It just ripped these horrible, gaping holes in their charging lines. Now, for the handful of guys who actually made it through that hellscape to the government lines, something new and awful was waiting for them. The government troops had been trained in this new bayonet drill. It was ingenious and brutal. Instead of fighting the guy right in front of you, you'd thrust your bayonet to the right, into the exposed side of the Highlander attacking your buddy. It totally bypassed their little round shield, the targe. It was a game changer, and it was devastatingly effective. The result was just a total catastrophe. And this chart really drives home just how lopsided this was. Look at that. The Jacobites, somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 men killed or wounded. The government army, around 50. In less than an hour, the entire Jacobite army was shattered and running for their lives. So, the fighting's over. But the story? Oh, it's far from done. The rout at Culloden was the final nail in the coffin for the Jacobite cause as any kind of real military threat. Amazingly, some of the survivors actually managed to regroup at a place called Ruthven Barracks, and they were ready to keep fighting. But then a message arrived from their prince, and it wasn't a call to arms. It was an order to disperse, every man for himself. Charles promised he'd be back with help from France, but it was a promise he could never keep. The 45 Rising was officially over. And what about Bonnie Prince Charlie? Well, he became the most wanted man in Britain. There was this huge 30,000-pound bounty on his head. That's an insane amount of money back then. He spent the next 5 months on the run, hiding out in the Highlands, famously getting help from people like Flora MacDonald, before he finally slipped away to France. He never saw Scotland again. But here's the thing. The real legacy of Culloden isn't just about a defeated army. No, it's about what came next. It was the deliberate, cold, calculated destruction of an entire culture. The government's revenge was swift and absolutely merciless. The Duke of Cumberland justified it by claiming the Jacobites were going to give no quarter, basically take no prisoners. And with that excuse, his troops were let loose to hunt down and kill anyone who was wounded or fleeing the field. This wasn't just in the heat of battle. This brutal cleanup went on for days. And what followed in the halls of Parliament was, in some ways, even more devastating. The government passed a whole slate of laws specifically designed to crush the Highland way of life for good. Jacobite leaders were executed, over 1,000 prisoners were shipped off to the colonies, a new law stripped the clan chiefs of all their traditional power. And then came the Act of Proscription, which, believe it or not, even banned things like wearing tartan. So you see, this wasn't just about punishing rebels. This was a policy. It was forced assimilation. The whole point was to break the clan system, to make sure the Highlands could never, ever again raise an army and threaten the crown. A unique way of life was being systematically erased. And that brings us to a really staggering fact. With all this history, all this weight, Culloden holds a very specific and kind of somber distinction. It was the last pitched battle, two armies lining up on a field ever fought on British soil. The last one. So that leaves us with this big question to think about. Was Culloden just the end of a rebellion, or was it something much bigger? Was it the violent birth of a new, more unified Britain, a nation forged by crushing one culture and forcing it into another? It's a heavy thought, and it's a legacy people are still grappling with today.